I'm Susan Ewan. Let's talk about abstract art. If you search for images of abstract art, these are the kinds of paintings that typically come up. They are brightly colored and look as if they were quickly painted using loose brush strokes and perhaps some blobs of paint. But an image like this will probably not come up, or one like this, or this, and certainly not one like this. Yet all of these images are also examples of abstract art. So what does the word abstract mean anyway? The word abstract can mean a lot of things. One meaning is difficult to understand. While that might be true in some instances, that's not what abstract artists are going for. This definition is closer. An abstract, as in a thesis abstract, is something that summarizes or concentrates the essentials of a larger thing or entity. For example, the plot summaries of TV listings are abstracts. Abstraction or simplification is a basic tenet of abstract art, something art historians explain as reducing an object to its essential visual characteristics. In other words, artists take out all the unnecessary and non-essential details. This portrait by Henri Matisse shows what this means. Notice how Matisse has been able to capture the essential characteristics of this woman's expression as well as her posture using only a few simple lines and shapes. The artist of the Justinian mosaic from 547 AD has done the same thing. Now you may be thinking that mosaics, which are made up of small individual pieces of colored stone or glass, cannot be realistic. Therefore, the artist had no choice. However, ancient Greek, Roman, and Byzantine artists could create very realistic mosaics, as this example shows. So, the artist of the Justinian mosaic made a conscious choice to be abstract. This still life by Pablo Picasso, done in 1922, carries the concept even further, reducing the objects to very simple geometric shapes, which, however, are still recognizable. Abstract art is always based on objects and concepts from the real world. Stay with me here. Art that is based on pure design is known as non-objective art. Let's think about this for a few seconds before we continue with our discussion. Beginning in the late 19th century, in addition to simplification, many artists began using expressive non-realistic color, which is different from the color found in nature. In this painting of water lilies, Impressionist artist Claude Monet uses what art historians term individualized or personal color. It looks realistic enough until you compare it with a photograph. Then you see how much Monet has changed the color for expressive purposes. Abstract artists also sometimes distort the form of objects. Paul Cézanne frequently used what is called tipped-up perspective, which makes the objects look as if they are about to slide off the table. This distortion can be seen by applying a horizon line and vanishing point to the composition. Modigliani and Giacometti both elongated the bodies of their subjects, and, going back to the Justinian mosaic, the artist distorted these figures by giving them larger than normal eyes and exaggerated features. He might also have enlarged the jewelry, although probably not by much, since Byzantine jewelry was certainly not subtle. In any case, compare the portrait of Justinian with the abstract self-portrait by Picasso done in 1907. Very similar. Simplification of form, expressive use of color, and distortions are the basic tenets of abstraction. But an artist does not have to use all three for an artwork to be considered abstract. For example, this landscape by Cézanne uses natural color, but he simplifies the details of the rocks and bushes in both the middle ground and the foreground. Here are two artworks that you might think are non-objective. That is, pure design with no reference to the real world. But the one on the left by Gino Severini is entitled Spherical Expansion of Light, and the one on the right by Kasimir Malevich is titled Airplane in Flight. So, both are depictions of reality, that is, of things that exist in the real world. Here is a photo of what inspired Severini, light seen through a rain-splattered window. And the geometric forms of early biplanes are what Malevich is depicting. Certainly both artworks are greatly simplified, but are not as removed from visual reality as you might have originally thought. But this painting by Vasily Kandinsky, done in 1912, is not abstract. It is non-objective. It is simply called Improvisation Number 28, second version. Oh no, I knew it. Abstract art is difficult to understand. Well, once you put this into historical context, as Sherlock Holmes remarked, all will be revealed. Realism, such as this painting by American artist Martin Johnson Heade, had been the preferred style in Western culture since 1400 and the beginning of the Italian Renaissance, although the move towards realism began a century earlier in the work of the Italian painter Giotto and in the artists who created sculptures for the Gothic cathedrals. These sculptures were even more realistic when new because they were brightly painted to imitate life. Although most of the paint is now gone, they would once have looked like these tomb sculptures, which still retain their original paint. However, realism was not always the preferred style. During the Romanesque period, which preceded the Gothic, both painting and sculpture was abstract, and this had been the case since the time of the Roman Emperor Constantine some 800 years earlier. But during the Renaissance, a renewed interest in classical antiquity, as well as an emphasis on individual freedom, fostered a preference for highly realistic art that focused on people and glorified their achievements. This led to the creation of some of the world's greatest artworks, and to the invention of a drawing technique now taught in every art class from elementary school on: linear perspective. Linear perspective, or Renaissance perspective, gave artists the tools to measure the space and draw everything in correct visual perspective, as close to nature as possible. This love of realism continued through the 17th century with artists such as Caravaggio, Rembrandt, and Vermeer, and into the 18th and 19th centuries with artists such as David, Jean-Dominique Ang, and John Singleton Copley. So what happened to abstraction? Don't worry. It remained alive and well. During the High Renaissance, a style known as Mannerism began in Italy. Although not a unified art movement, Mannerist artworks share a number of stylistic characteristics that fall into the category of abstraction. The figures are distorted and elongated, often posed in contorted, exaggerated, and unnatural positions. Expressive color that does not necessarily reflect nature. And simplification. This can be seen in Michelangelo's Rondinini Pietà and in the sculptures he created for the Medici tombs. Dusk and dawn, and night and day. The face of day is especially abstract, with simplified features that are only partially delineated. In the 17th century, painters such as Rembrandt, Velázquez, and Frans Hals also subtly moved towards abstraction, using very loose brushstrokes and plain backgrounds. This painting style inspired early Impressionist artist Edouard Manet. However, realism continued to dominate Western art, that is, until the first half of the 19th century, when photography was invented. This had an immediate impact because now, instead of having to hire an artist to paint, say, a portrait of your family, as had been done since ancient times, people could have a photograph taken which was cheaper, much faster, and an exact likeness. Artists had to do something different. As Fauve artist André Durand explained, it was the era of photography. We reacted against anything resembling a snapshot. We used color like sticks of dynamite, exploding off the surface of the canvas. What followed was over 100 years of isms, bold, personal art styles, some of them abstract, some of them non-objective. Which brings us back to our internet search. By the 21st century, the terms abstract art and non-objective art have merged in the public's mind. This is probably because of a very influential and long-lasting style that first appeared in New York City in the 1940s, known as abstract expressionism. Abstract expressionism includes the action paintings of Jackson Pollock, as well as the color field paintings of Mark Rothko, and much, much more. Most abstract expressionist works are non-objective, based on pure design, with no reference to visual reality, although some include figures and other references to the real world. This can be confusing to human beings whose brains are hardwired to see real objects in things like clouds and wood grain. But asking, what is that supposed to be, when looking at a non-objective work is not the point. Art does not have to be about anything. It is, as Kandinsky explained, a composition, an arrangement, just like music. Only instead of musical notes, visual artists use the elements of design, line, color, shape, texture, and value. So, what is this painting by Casimir Malevich supposed to be? Well, it's a black square on a white ground. And this work by Jackson Pollock? It's entitled Blue Poles. And this work painted by me, hanging in my dining room. I called it Landforms because I needed a title, but it's really pure design. So there you have it. If you want to understand abstract art, or non-objective art, or realistic art for that matter, simply look at the artwork itself and accept it on its own terms. Then let it wash over you like music. For the 10-Minute Professor, this is Dr. Susan Ray Euler. Thanks for tuning in.